Before we start this video, a large thank you to Bam, Montoya, Jason, Flavio, Lou, Alamakis, and Tristan for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. And an immense thank you to Halaburn this month for their continued support to the channel. I hope you enjoy the video, my friend. Hello guys, and today we're going to finish off the two-hand system, at least for now. We'll come back and make adjustments later on as we add more actions and stuff. But I'm just going to go to the animator window here and copy all of the main-handed animation states. I'm just going to paste those. I'm actually going to put the two-handed under the main-handed like so. And I'm just going to go ahead and change all of the main to, you can make it either two-handed, just using the words here like two-handed. And honestly, in my case, I'm just going to say TH because that's pretty clear to me. Now, I'm not going to make you watch me do all these, so I'm just going to snap back in a second when they're all done. There we go. The magic of editing. Now I'm going to make transitions back to the empty state. And if you are using any animation pack that we have on our asset store, you're going to have two-handed animations. You just set them up the exact same way. You have the main-handed animation set up. And if not, you have your own way of doing it. It's filling your animations now wherever you can. So again, if I go over here, now there is no unarmed two-handed animation. So if I go to Nephilim here, you can see I've got these unarmed two-handed animations. All I've done is just duplicated my unarmed animation and renamed it to two-handed just because I liked having the name distinction. But that doesn't matter. Like, you don't need to do that. It's just a lot of extra work. I'm just particular over naming, as I'm sure a lot of you know. So what you can do is just go ahead and drop in your straight sword or whatever weapon you want as your default two-hand animation set, because you can never two-hand the unarmed weapon. So I'm going to make my straight sword the default two-hand animation set. And if I'm using a weapon that doesn't use these animations, I'll just override it with the weapon animator override controller. So I'm going to go ahead and drag in all these. Again, I won't make you watch all this. I'm just going to snap now with the magic of editing after just do a couple more. Just going to drop in these charge attacks here. So it is, again, it's the exact same thing. Just instead of one-handed or main-handed, you're just going to use the two-handed animations. Everything is identical unless you don't want to have two-handed animations. And I'll just drop this one here and then we'll snap back. All right, so we're back. Okay, so that's all done. I have my light attack, 1, 2, run attack, roll attack, backstep, all my charge attacks. Cool, looking good. All right, what's next? Well, you want to go to all of your controllers, which I've already done, and override every animation for each weapon set you have. So I have the spear, the shield, and the sword. So I've gone ahead and done that for all of those. Now you want to go and find your light attack weapon item action. This is the first one we're going to do. You want to copy all your animations here and paste them right below. And this is going to be very easy because the way it's set up, we just basically add a couple letters. I'm going to make a green pseudocode comment here to separate this, like make it very clear visually so you can see right away what's happening, main hand and two hand. And I'm just going to add th underscore to all these variables, lowercase. And on the variable over here, I'm just going to add a capital TH to match my animation state name. Copy that, paste that like so. And we should be good to go. That's all we need to change there. And now we actually need to add how these are going to be played. So this is very simple. I generally, as a rule of thumb, we're going to start with the perform light attack. I don't like having too many if statements together because I find it looks very messy. So I'm going to separate this out into two separate functions. We're going to call it perform main hand light attack and performed two-hand light attack. Now you don't need to do this if having a bunch of if statements, or not a bunch, I'm going to say just 3 layers really instead of 2, doesn't bother you, then by all means keep it within the same function, but I'll show you why I like doing this. So I'm just going to make 2 of these, make them require the same thing here, the player performing the action and the weapon performing the action. And now I will paste the logic inside our original here, and this is one-handed logic obviously, so I will paste it in both because we're just going to replace a couple letters. And I'm just going to say if we are two-handing, so if player performing action dot player network manager is two-handing weapon dot value, we want to call the perform two-hand light attack function, and we pass the player performing action and the weapon performing action. Otherwise, we perform the main hand light attack action, and again, we pass the player performing the action and the weapon performing the action, and this will just be the code that we had there originally. So you don't need to do this. As you can see, you could just basically make an if the player is two-handing weapon. You could just use this if statement and paste all the original logic in the else and place the new logic under the is two-handing weapon. But I think this looks a bit cleaner. It's easier to read at first glance, so I'm just going to keep it separated. So now I will copy the original logic, place it down here in the performing two-handed logic, and all we got to do is go everywhere you see a light attack 01 and just put th underscore, and that's what we called our new variable. And just do the same thing with light attack 2. Just basically wherever you see an attack being called, just put this here like so. And that looks good. All right, it's just that easy. So you might miss some of these too, because it's really easy to do that. I've done that before when creating actions for Nephilim. So just test these in game after you've done so. It's very, very easy just to miss one or two and just kind of forget to put the two-handed in front of them. Now, with the running attack, the rolling attack, and the backstep attack, these functions are so small, I don't mind just adding the if statement here. We don't need to separate these. And again, you didn't need to separate the other two either. That is just personal preference. Some people get really annoyed when they see more than two if chains in a single function. They say it's hard to read. And I can understand that. I don't mind really 3, but once you get past that, it is pretty unruly. All right, so again, the same thing. Just put th underscore wherever you want to do the two-handed action, and you're good to go. All right, so it's the same thing more or less down here with these two, except we're going to take the flag here. For example, can perform rolling action. I want to do that first. That way you don't need to put it in the if and the else statement. It's just a little bit cleaner. So I'm just going to say if we are two-handing the action, then we're going to say else. And again, we're just playing the singular animation, so we can copy and paste this if-else chain down here too. After we reset the flag, in this case it's can perform backstep attack. And then we put the original line of code in the else statement, and then we paste it in the new statement and just add th to the animation, and we are good to go. Alright, same thing with down here. Just going to copy this, paste it in the else and the if statement. And on the if, we're just going to say if th. There we go. All right, let's save that. I think that's every attack function here. Now we can go on to the heavy attack. Just going to double check here. Yep, that is definitely. So yeah, again, you can see here like there's a chain here and a chain here, so that's 2. If you add a third one to that, it would kind of get a bit messy. That's just why I separated there. So let's go to the heavy attack weapon item action. And this is more or less the same as the light attack one, where I'm going to make 2 separate functions here because I just don't want the 3 if statement chains looking kind of messy. So private void perform main hand heavy attack, pass the player performing an action and the weapon performing an action, and then we're going to have a perform two-hand heavy attack. And again, we can take the original logic and place that in the main hand, and in the two-hand it's the exact same thing, but we're just going to add the two-handed animations instead of the one-handed. All right, so paste this. Let's go to the logic here and copy all of it. And we're just going to place this down here like so, and then place this down here. So heavy attack 02 becomes th underscore heavy attack 02, heavy attack 01 becomes th underscore heavy attack 01, etc., etc. Now these don't exist yet, so you're going to get an error. That's okay. We'll go and make those variables right now. But first I'll just call this logic here so it's complete. If players performing action.player network manager is two-handing weapon, then you know by now we call the two-handed function. Otherwise, we call the main-handed function. Okay, so the variables, again, the same thing as well. You can just copy and paste the heavy attack 01 and heavy attack 02 and just keep everything the same, but add a th in front of it, and you're good to go. And I think that's all the attacks we have for now that we've set up. So let's just go ahead and change this, th, and then th, and then capital Th for the animation. And let's go ahead and save that. Okay, so I'm in a game here now. You can see, boom, there we go. I'm two-handing, and I do play the two-handed swinging animation for light and heavy attacks. Cool, so we don't have any animation events set up, so don't forget to do that. Otherwise, you won't have things happen like drain stamina, opening and closing your damage colliders, which means you're not really doing anything. Now, if you're using the same animation pack from our store, a lot of the frame timings for opening and closing for the light attacks are pretty similar. So what I'm trying to say is the frame time for opening and closing the damage collider on the light attack for the two-handed and the one-handed straight sword is very similar. So you can get away with kind of copying and pasting these, just moving them around to fit the animation, but the window is almost the same. Now if I go over and get this guy to notice me, I let him swing, I'll get out of the way, and then I can attack him, and boom, there we go, we do some damage. I'll do the same thing again, make sure the combo is working. So 1, 2, yes it is. Okay, cool, working as intended, let's keep moving. Alright, so I'm going to jump back into the project, go to the character effects manager. So now we're going to set up our static effect systems. We have an instant effect system. What's a static effect system? Well, think of an instant effect system as applying something that is done, right? A static effect system is something that modifies your character. Statically, it's there, but you can remove it to remove the modification, whereas instant, it kind of processes and leaves. So we want to keep a list of static effects. And to think of this, let's say you find a helmet that modifies your strength. That will be a static effect. While you're wearing it, you have +4 strength. You take it off, you no longer have +4 strength. So that's how I do a lot of the cooler effects in Nephilim 2 for those who were asking before. I have static effects, timed effects, and instant effects. So let's make a function called add static effect. And let's make some pseudocode. All we got to do really here is add a static effect to the character and to the list. But that's kind of the same thing, I guess. And then we're going to remove a static effect. And what we do here, well, we just remove the static effect from the character and from the list. So that's really it. It's just that simple because there's no other logic happening here except for when you add it and remove it. So let's go to our effects folder. Let's create a new C# script. And we're going to call this static character effect to keep in the same naming conventions as our instant character effect. Let's open that up. It's going to be a scriptable object. Let's erase the start and update functionality and add in our namespace as is per tradition. And what we're going to do is make this derived from scriptable object, and we're going to give it a singular variable at first. And this is honestly optional, but if you want to use static effects and have them sync across the network, it's not optional, at least not the way I'm doing it. So you want to give every effect an effect ID. And I'm just going to call this public int effect ID. And then let's make two virtual voids, one for adding the effect, which we can call process effect, and one for removing the effect. So processing a static effect basically means that there's something that's going to happen when this effect is assigned to your character, so let's make that logic happen. It might add something to your stats, it might add a spell or remove an item to you, etc., etc. And then likewise, when you remove the static effect, it undoes the original thing that the process effect does. So to keep it very simple, if you had a piece of armor that added to your stats, let's say strength, then when you wear it, you process it, you get the strength, you remove it, you take it off, you lose the strength. So you can see where this is going with the two-handed strength effect. Let's go to create another C# script, and we're going to call this script two-handing effect. Now, remember I said in Dark Souls and in Elden Ring, when you two-hand your weapon, you get your strength level plus half of your strength level added on your modifier. So if you have 30 strength, your strength becomes 45 while you're two-handing. So here we go. Gonna add in my namespace and make this derived from static character effect. And what we can do is just create an asset menu up here for this, so we can make it in the game, much like we do with our take damage effect. And we can say character effects / static effects. We can call this two-handing effect. All right, cool. So in here now, all we need to do is make a serializable field for an integer, if you want to see it, that is, strength gained from two-handing weapon. I do like seeing this in case something goes wrong, so this lets us see the static or the effect variables here in the inspector. So I'm going to override process static effect, and I'm going to override remove static effect. Now, let's say if character is owner, I'm saying this because on the off chance you want to sync your effects via server RPCs, you won't need to if you're just doing Elden Ring logic, I don't think, but we want to check for is owner. I'll explain more on that in a minute. So we can say strength gained from two-handing weapon is equal to character network manager.strength level, which we don't have yet. So let's make a network variable for our strength stat. We have the vitality and endurance. We don't have strength yet. So let's go ahead and make that. All right, strength. Cool. Now let's go back here. What we want to do is take 50% of this. So we can say strength.value divided by 2. And we can round that to, we can say mathf.round to int, just to be sure. So we're going to say strength gained from two-handing weapon equals mathf.round to int, and we take our character's strength level divided by 2. All right, cool. What do we do now? Well, we want to add this to a modifier, which we don't have yet, so let's make that. But let's also throw a debug.log for the strength gained so we can see it in the inspector when this is happening to make sure it's all working correctly. We can say strength gained from two-handing weapon. Cool, save that. All right, so now let's go over here and let's go to stats, make a new header for modifiers or stats modifiers. And let's make a strength modifier. All right, cool. So just going to paste the strength level. We're going to add modifier to the end of that. And your total strength will be your strength level plus your strength modifier. Now, let's go back here. And obviously, these stats don't matter right now. We haven't done weapon requirements or scaling damage yet, but they will in the future. We're going to say character.characterNetworkManager.strengthModifier.value plus equals the strength gained from this weapon. And likewise, when you remove this effect, we've already calculated the strength gained from the two-handing weapon. So while we store it, we want to minus that from the strength modifier. So it's basically just going to go back to whatever it was, and that'll be it. So let's save that now, and we want to actually create this effect. Let's go to data. Let's go to effects. Let's create a new folder for our static effects. Just going to call this static effects, and I am going to right-click, create character effects, static effects, two-handing effect. All right, now likewise, let's set up our world character effects manager to support this new static effects system. So we want to keep track of our IDs. We want our game to write our IDs for us. It would be kind of tedious having to go through every ID. What if you forget one? You don't want to leave it a chance. So let's duplicate the list of instant effects here. I'm going to add a header to it as well, call it instant effects. Going to create a new header here called static effects, like so. There we go. Generate effect IDs. Come down, make another for loop. And we want to reference our new list of static effects. And then we're just going to say the same thing we do with the instant effects. We're going to say static effects I dot static effect ID is equal to I. So I'm realizing now I've called this effect ID. And this also should be a static effect, not an instant effect. I'm going to change that type. That's where I copied and pasted it. Static character effect. Yeah, so I call this effect ID, but to keep with the naming conventions, I'm going to rename this to static effect ID because I have instant effects called instant effect ID. All right, cool. That looks good. And now we're going to equal that to I. So yeah, it will auto-populate the list for you, or go through list rather, and auto-assign the effect ID with its position in the list. And that's very simple, and I like how that works out. No need to overcomplicate it. Now let's make a header for two-hand. Let's just add a variable here for our two-handing effect, and let's just create that and then drop in there. Let's go to the character effects manager, and let's make a list now of static effects. First, make a header for us. So it's clear in the inspector. Static effects. Make a public list for static character effects. All right, so you can initialize that here as well if you want by saying is equal to a new list of static effects. Just going to do that like so. And now we can start writing the logic down here for adding and removing them. So I'm going to make a note here because you don't need it right now. If you want to sync these, like let's say you got some kind of cool particle effects that play every time an effect happens, right? You want to sync that so everyone else sees it on the other end. So you make a server RPC for the host, and then you use the effect ID, get it from the World Character Effects Manager, pass that, and then basically make that effect happen on your character model on somebody else's screen. That's only if you want to do some stuff that's not just numbers, and we actually don't need to do that. I don't think we'll ever need to do that if we strictly follow things with Elden Ring. But if you guys want, I can cover that. If that's something you want to see, it is very, very simple. I'm sure you can figure it out on your own. Like you have the direction now. You can go ahead and do that. But if you want me to do it too, just let me know. I will. But we're going to keep it very simple now. We're going to stick to just purely what Elden Ring does, and we're just changing some numbers around. So we're going to say static effects.add effect, and then we're going to say effect.process static effect, and we pass our character. So let's make some comments here. So one, we add the static effect to the character. Two, we process its effect, and then we want to check for null entries in our list. You probably won't ever need this, but if something weird happens and for some reason some kind of effect gets destroyed or something happens in the game, you want to remove any null entries in your list just in case. So just going to do that. It's always good to do that, and we'll go down through the list here and remove them if they're null. Now, under remove static effects, same thing. You want to use the server RPC to remove this from the character whenever you're removing it if you want to sync it across the network. Maybe you have some kind of particles that play and you don't want, or you want the particles to play for everybody. This is a good way to do it. Same thing that we do with our take damage effect. So remove the static effect from the character. We're going to do this by effect ID because all the effects are clones, so it's not the original. So it's just easier to get it by the ID. This is also good too if you want to pass this for the server RPC. Likewise, you'd pass the ID when you're adding it above. So we're just going to make a static character effect variable. We're going to sort through our static effects. And if the static effect is not null, if the static effects ID also equals the ID of the effect ID we're passing, then we want to first take this effect and remove the character effect from the player by referencing the effect itself. Remember how we have process static effect and remove static effect? We want to call that remove static effect and then remove it from the list. Otherwise, you're just taking it out of the list and you're not actually taking the effect of it off the character. So effect equals static effects I, effect.remove static effect, pass the character, and then we can say static effects.remove, and then we're going to remove the effect. So there we go. That's it. It's very simple, and that is that's my static effect system in a nutshell from Nephilim as well. It's basically identical. You can do some really cool stuff with this, and this is how I alter stats and add different logic when I equip armor or different weapons and stuff with effects on them. So let's also check for nulls too afterwards, null entries in the list, and remove them. And I am going to add some comments here like so. Remove static effect from character, remove static effect from the list. There we go. And 3, check for null entries in your list and remove them. All right, let's save that. That's looking good. I'm just checking this over now. Yep, cool. Now if I go back to the project, let's go to the World Character Effects Manager. Let's drag in our two-handing effect and drag in the static effect. Always do it in your prefab, guys, never in the scene, because if you do it in the scene, it doesn't affect the prefab. So you could get some mix-ups there where you think the prefab has some additions that the scene version does, but it does not. Next, go to Player Network Manager. Go to On is Two-Handing Weapon Changed and make an else if we're not two-handing a weapon. Now, if we are not two-handing a weapon, this assumes that we have the two-handed static effect. So first, let's go to the Player Manager and let's make a public Player Effects Manager variable. Hide inspector, don't need to see it. Thought we had one of those, but apparently we've had no reason to reference it up to this point. We're going to say Player Effects Manager on awake is equal to get component Player Effects Manager. Now we're going to say player.player effects manager dot remove static effect. We pass the static effect ID of the two-handed effect, which we get by going to the World Character Effects Manager singleton.instance.two-handing effect.static effect ID. And it's just that simple. And now to add it, it is a scriptable, so we should never use the original. In this case, it wouldn't really matter, to be honest, but still don't do it. Static character effect, two-handing effect, or two-hand effect, is equal to instantiate. And then we just instantiate a copy of it from the World Character Effects Manager, like so. And then we can just add it to the player by saying player effects manager, yada, yada, yada. Now, in this case, you don't even need to sync the effect with the server RPC, because this is called on both the host's end and the other person's game object in their game, unless you specify with if is owner. So I'm going to save that, go back to the game now, and if I change my strength to, we'll put it to 20, it should give me a +10, so I'm going to two-hand the weapon. My strength modifier goes from, I don't know what's at 1 by default, probably because I assigned it, so yeah, it goes to 11 and +10, that is correct. Now, if I un-two-hand it, it should go back down to +1, not 0, because it added 10. Yes, it does. Cool. So if I go to the Player Effects Manager here now, and I two-hand it again, you should see the two-handed effect pop up in my static effect list. Let's look at it. Static effect 0, I'm going to two-hand my weapon, and yes, there it is. And now if I un-two-hand my weapon, it should go away, and yes, there it is. So there you go, guys. That's our two-handed system, and now we have a static effect system, so you can add a lot of cool stuff with this. Now, I want to ask for your input on what you guys would like to see next, because we can go in a lot of different directions. I heard a few people talking about weapon trails, and that's really fun. I'd love to do that. We can get into weapon requirements, so it won't allow you to really hit properly with the weapon if you don't meet the requirements. We can get into scaling bonuses, where you can calculate the extra damage you get from having certain stats, or we can move on to equipment and getting some armor equipped to our character. What would you guys like to see? I'm asking you, because honestly, we can go in any direction right now, and it all adds, I feel, the same amount to the project, and I'm cool with going any route. If I don't get a definite answer, I'll kind of come to a decision on my own. But yeah, guys, thank you very much for joining me again this weekend. I hope you all have a very lovely weekend. As always, a special thank you to my patrons. It is because of each and every one of you I get to keep making this series, and I love making this series, so genuinely thank you so much. I will see you guys next week. Take care.